response. The molestation is so great and so persistent that the tarantula often rises on all 8 legs as if it were on stilts. It may stand this way for several minutes. Meanwhile, the wasp, having satisfied itself that the victim is of the right species, moves off a few inches to dig the spider's grave. Working vigorously with legs and jaws, it excavates a hole 8 to 10 inches deep with a diameter slightly larger than the spider's girth. Now and again, the wasp hops out of the hole to make sure that the spider is still there.
Amazing, right?
When the grave is finished, the wasp returns to the tarantula to complete her ghastly enterprise. First, she feels it all over once more with her antennae. Then her behavior becomes more aggressive. She bends her abdomen, protruding her sting, and searches for the soft membrane at the point where the spider's legs join its body, the only spot where she can penetrate the horny skeleton. From time to time, as the exasperated spider slowly shifts ground, the wasp turns on her back and slides along with the aid of her wings, trying to get under the tarantula for a shot at the vital spot. During all this maneuvering, which can last for several minutes, the tarantula makes no move to save itself. Finally, the wasp corners it against some obstruction and grasps one of its legs in her powerful jaws. Now, at last, the harassed spider tries a desperate but vain defense. The 2 contestants roll over and over on the ground. It is a terrifying sight, and the outcome is always the same. The wasp finally manages to thrust her sting into the soft spot and holds it there for a few seconds while she pumps in the poison. Almost immediately, the tarantula falls paralyzed on its back. Its legs stop twitching. Its heart stops beating. Yet it is not dead, as is shown by the fact that if taken from the wasp, it can be restored to some sensitivity by being kept in a moist chamber for several months.
469.
After paralyzing the tarantula, the wasp cleans herself by dragging her body along the ground and rubbing her feet, sucks the drops of blood oozing from the wound in the spider's abdomen, then grabs a leg of the flabby, helpless animal in her jaws and drags it down to the bottom of the grave. She stays there for many minutes, sometimes for several hours, and what she does all that time in the dark, we do not know. Eventually, she lays her egg and attaches it to the side of the spider's abdomen with a sticky secretion. Then she emerges, fills the grave with soil carried bit by bit in her jaws, and finally tramples the ground all around to hide any trace of the grave from prowlers. Then she flies away, leaving her descendants safely started in life.
Okay, I've had students that say, this is like gross, but it is amazing. Jot down really quickly at level 1. If I were to ask you now, see, watch how cool this is. This is what's great about reading these essays. If I were to ask you right now, just list the steps from memory, the steps of how a wasp kills a tarantula. Ready, set, go. What would you write down? Basically 3 steps, right? 1, the grooming to make sure that in fact this is the correct species of spider. 2, the digging of the grave. Are you serious with me right now? The wasp digs the grave to make sure that it's large enough for the tarantula. 3, the killing of the tarantula, the dragging it into its grave, the covering after laying the egg on the tarantula's abdomen, the covering of the grave, and even patting down the soil so that no one can actually see what's buried underneath. Remarkable. All right, now, we're going to get to the end of our essay where Petrunkevitch is going to give us a little bit of some comparative analyses as we finish this essay. Hopefully at this point you're enough curious about this situation to want to hear the final comments that are made. All right, so here we go. Let's pay attention now to how he finishes.
In all this, the behavior of the wasp evidently is qualitatively different from that of the spider. The wasp acts like an intelligent animal. This is not to say that instinct plays no part, or that she reasons as man does. But her actions are to the point. They are not automatic and can be modified to fit the situation. We do not know for certain how she identifies the tarantula. Probably it is by some olfactory or chemotactile sense. But she does it purposefully and does not blindly tackle a wrong species.
The sense of smell, right?
On the other hand, The tarantula's behavior shows only confusion. Evidently, the wasp's pawing gives it no pleasure, for it tries to move away. That the wasp is not simulating sexual stimulation is certain because male and female tarantulas react in the same way to its advances. That the spider is not anesthetized by some odorless secretion is easily shown by blowing lightly at the tarantula and making it jump suddenly. What, then, makes the tarantula behave as stupidly as it does?
Great question, right?
No clear, simple answer is available. Possibly the stimulation by the wasp's antennae is masked by a heavier pressure on the spider's body, so that it reacts as when prodded by a pencil. But the explanation may be much more complex.
You think?
Initiative in attack is not in the nature of tarantulas. Most species fight only when cornered so that escape is impossible.
470.
Their inherited patterns of behavior apparently prompt them to avoid problems rather than attack them. For example, spiders always weave their webs in 3 dimensions, and when a spider finds that there is insufficient space to attach certain threads in the 3rd dimension, it leaves the place and seeks another, instead of finishing the web in a single plane. This urge to escape seems to arise under all circumstances, in all phases of life, and to take the place of reasoning. For a spider to change the pattern of its web is as impossible as for an inexperienced man to build a bridge across a chasm obstructing his way. In a way, the instinctive urge to escape is not only easier, but often more efficient than reasoning. The tarantula does exactly what is most efficient in all cases, except in an encounter with a ruthless and determined attacker dependent for the existence of her own species on killing as many tarantulas as she can lay eggs. Perhaps in this case, the spider follows its usual pattern of trying to escape, instead of seizing and killing the wasp, because it is not aware of its danger. In any case, the survival of the tarantula species as a whole is protected by the fact that the spider is much more fertile than the wasp.
Now, let's jump really quickly. We've worked at level 1, right? So obviously we've got a sense of how this essay is laid out. Let's work really quickly at level 2B for just a moment, and then we'll come back to 2A. At level 2B, how do you understand the organization of this essay? See, watch this. This is how we learn how to read better. So you're reading a work of nonfiction. Basically, this is like reading something out of your biology textbook, isn't it, right? Notice how this chapter is divided, or this essay is divided into 3 parts. Did you notice this? Okay, we'll call it 4. Well, that's fine. We'll call it 4. So let's put this at 2B. We got fundamentally 4 parts to this essay. Part 1, introduction. Where Petrunkevitch says, it's interesting how the world of nature is symbiotic, how the world of nature is somehow so interrelated. There's this strange balance and harmony. Oh, you don't believe me? Let me give you an example. Part 2, he introduces the tarantula, amazing species of spider that has all kinds of interesting things that you wrote down, that you learned about. Some of that stuff you'd never heard about before. Then he finishes his introduction to the tarantula by saying, yeah, number 3, there's this really interesting thing called this wasp, this digger wasp. By the way, why is it called a digger wasp? Well, there's some irony there, obviously, right? Yeah, let me tell you about this wasp and how amazing this wasp is. Because this wasp has to have the tarantula, a certain kind, to be able to at all allow for new baby wasps to be born. Now, some of you will say, dude, I hate wasps, I hate spiders, why should I care about this? Then bypass that part of it. That is to say, don't be sophomoric. And answer this simple question. Isn't the world of nature quite remarkable? He makes the argument in the 3rd part, let me tell you about the symbiosis, the relationship, between these tarantulas and these wasps. And then he goes through detail to tell us about the wasp and the way that the wasp kills the tarantula, buries the tarantula, and the like. The 4th part of the essay is the most interesting. And it begs the most obvious question. These really scary looking spiders, these tarantulas, how come they just don't jack the wasp and be done with it? Why is it that they will allow that wasp to kill them? This leading us, of course, to the question of instinct versus intelligence. And notice that our really brilliant scientist admits we don't know. We're not exactly sure why. We can kind of guess at maybe reasons why. We have no idea in the end why it is the case that it is the case. You got me? So that's the organization of the essay. So notice how we begin with a little bit of an introduction, we lead to our then two main points, and then finish with some concluding observations. That's how the essay is laid out. Now, we know the essay at level 1. Let's jump to 2A. What is for you a major message here of an essay like this? What do you think Petrunkevitch is trying to say? I mean, is he writing you because you need to be interested in spiders? Yeah, maybe. Because you're interested in wasps? Yeah, maybe. But you get a sense that he wants you to learn something else. What is that something else? Well, some sophomores, as they've read this, as they've studied and read this essay, has said the following. One clear message is the remarkable complexity of the world of nature. Right? Let's write that one down. Everything somehow fits together. And that's quite remarkable when you think about it. Everything depends upon everything. It's got nothing to do with what you like or do not like. By the way, we'll ask this question at 3B. Why, for so many students, do they hate spiders? Yeah, I hate spiders. Really, why? What do you mean, why? Because they're spiders? No. That's a silly childlike answer. You say you hate spiders, write down a reason why. Give a real reason why. Because they can bite me. I'm sorry, your dog can bite you. That's the dog you love. Oh yeah, I guess I haven't thought about that. So I'll ask it again. Why do you hate spiders? Well, come to think of it, I don't really have a good reason. Even if I got bit or stung by a spider once, that doesn't really give me, I guess, a legitimate reason to hate all spiders. Why would I hate spiders? Man, I don't know. This essay, another 2A observation, this essay says, why don't you learn to become more curious about the world instead of frightened of the world? Woo! What an interesting idea. What would it be like to come to school every day and not be frightened or not be frustrated or not be, that place sucks, I hate that place. That attitude, that of course will mean the moment you walk through the doors of the school, you're done. I'm just ready for it to be over. Be over for what? So I can get out. Get out to do what? So I can work the rest of my life, doing the same thing every day. That last time I checked, that's called school. That's called school. Well, yeah, at least I get paid. Paid to do what? In other words, what would it be like to look at our lives from a completely different perspective? A perspective of curiosity, of wonder. Gee, that is amazing. How does all this work together? That just blows my mind. That attitude is, of course, the evolving attitude of the student. The desire to learn new things. The desire to grow. The desire to be something more than you are. Petrunkevitch would say, the study of the world of nature and spiders and wasps can lead us to ask, finally a third point, nature asks very interesting philosophic questions. How does a species like this wasp, what, did it go to wasp school to learn how to do this thing with the tarantula? And to what degree then is this instinct versus intelligence? And is there a difference between the two? And does one come before the other? Let's jump to 3A. All right, what's your favorite films, text that maybe will play this game? I have a lot of sophomores who are Pete Jackson fans who love the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and of course they know that famous scene where that nasty spider that's way too big is fighting, of course, in that cave against our hero, and from that point on, those spiders just freak us out, and yet it's a text that's made so beautifully, constructed so beautifully, and even with the music, that you want to go back and see it again, or some do anyway. What's some other text for you? What is your favorite text that suggests to you the complexity, the beauty of life? You might go back to the Rachel Carson, that text about the margins, the shoreline, and how amazing that one was. What is your favorite text that celebrates the beauty of life? It might be a song that reminds you how incredibly precious and beautiful life is. Finally at 3B, well, we've already asked the question, what is your relationship to spiders, maybe your relationship to wasps as well. Let's ask this question. Rate yourself. Talk to yourself. How much are you curious about the world? And why is it when you were young? Dude, when you were young, you could spend so much time with a dandelion. You were so stunned by that, so amazed by that. This may even be before you can even remember it, when you could study a dandelion and just be blown away by that kind of stuff. What happened? What happened in your education that somehow you began to lose interest in this thing called your life and the world you live in? So that now you become like one of those things in those shows, zombie-like. I mean, here in a second, when you leave and go out into the halls of Worland High School after the bell rings, just watch students as they move through the halls. They look like something from Walking Dead, zombies, moving slowly to their next place. But for what? What's the purpose of all of it? To what degree do you have a relationship with nature that will maybe need to grow, develop, to look beyond, right? That is to say, don't be, as you'll remember from our study of Psalm of Life, don't be like dumb, driven cattle. Be a hero in the strife. Going back, of course, to 3a, my heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky, the world of nature. It's amazing. I hope maybe a study like this can turn you on to the possibility of seeing nature with a little bit more eye of curiosity, of wonder, and thereby growing, maturing. Thank you.